think it's all done. Should be all sorted.
You can let them in now.
Actually, if you just change your name as well.
Welcome.
Perfect. So we're just going to let everyone in. Hello, everyone. So yeah, people who haven't met me before, my name's Shivam. So I'm a fourth-year medical student with lots and lots of exams coming up soon. So this will be actually, unfortunately, be the last one of a series that I will be taking part in today, and then the rest of the series will be completed by one of my colleagues. So today we're going to be going through quantitative reasoning. We'll just wait for another couple of minutes or so, let the last few people come in, and we'll jump straight to it. The whole idea of today is we're going to be going through estimating, guesstimating. One thing I would say, you don't need a calculator today. If you do have one to hand, then brilliant. Just to kind of check answers and things like that. But actually, it's better if you don't use a calculator today. I'm going to be going through a few things today. A lot of it will be revolving around kind of guesstimating. It's this combination of how can you guess answers, how can you estimate answers as well. Okay, so we'll just give 1 more minute or so. Ashir, I assume that you'll just let everyone in. Is that all okay?
Yep, that works perfectly fine.
Yeah, perfect. Brilliant. Okay, I think I'm going to jump straight into it. So today's lesson is going to be on estimating, and a lot of it will be revolving around time saving. So again, over the last few weeks, a lot of people have been asking me, they've been saying, look, Shivam, quantitative reasoning is okay, but it's the time that I really struggle with. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go on to the next slide and then also just ask a couple of questions today at the beginning. So aims of today, I want to go through 4 things in particular. There'll be estimating in the UCAT, eyeballing graphs, because graphs are one of the most common questions that are asked in the quantitative reasoning section. And then I'm going to really go through overestimating and underestimating. And then finally, just going through how to check your answer. So if you think you've got your answer in quantitative reasoning, is there a way to double check it quite quickly? So we'll start off with estimating precision. Again, it would be really useful if someone could just raise their hand and just very briefly summarize what's the difference between estimating and using precision in quantitative reasoning. When do you think you'll need to use either of the two? So again, just raise your hand, put it in the chat. Otherwise, I'll be sitting here all day. So when do you think you need to use estimating? Yeah, Chloe, go for it.
You could use it when the answers are far apart.
Yeah, brilliant. And what about the type of question they're asking you?
Maybe some of them do say like an about answer. They don't ask for a specific answer all the time.
Yeah, brilliant. So two bits of information that you've mentioned, and I'll just really emphasize that today in terms of reading the question. Okay, so we're going to start off with this first question. Again, I will actually get the poll up for everyone so everyone can actually answer the question. You just bear with me for 1 second. There we go. So let's try and answer this first initial question. There we go. Brilliant. So I'll give you another 5 seconds. Good stuff. So, Chloe, do you mind just telling me a bit about how you got to your answer and what you did and what you thought would be the best way to get to the answer as quickly as possible?
I rounded the 122 down to 120, and then I rounded the 580 up to 600. And I know that 120 goes into 600 around about 5 times. And I've just found the answer that was closest to 5.
So what was it about this question that allowed you to do that, do you think?
The answers are quite far apart, I'd say. There's quite a big gap between A and E.
Yeah, definitely. So they're very far apart, and also they're using numbers that aren't too complicated. They're not, you know, we're not talking about decimal places like 0.000, for example, which might need to be a bit more accurate. Some people might find with a question like this, if you're very, very quick at using the calculator, it might have just been easier to work it out with a calculator, of course. But questions in quantitative reasoning are generally not going to be this easy. This might be the first of maybe 3 or 4 steps in quantitative reasoning. Okay, so what do I mean by 3 or 4 steps? Well, the question would ask you to do some calculations, and that would lead you to having to work out, for example, maybe how many balls are purchased, and then how many is distributed to each player, how many would they use in the year, for example. So it would be a step-by-step process. So this might be one of 2 or 3 steps. Okay, so if we have 2 or 3 steps, then again, have a think about that. It might be better to use the calculator on the first step and then maybe start using estimation on the second and third step, so that your answer is going to be more accurate, if that makes sense. So you don't want to be, if there's 3 steps, you don't want to be estimating in your first step and then maybe using the calculator in your third step, because that's going to be less accurate. Okay. So again, I'll just clarify this again. So the way that I kind of would have done something like this is I probably would have used the calculator. If this was just a question by itself, I probably would have used the calculator quite quickly. However, you can do exactly what Chloe was saying, doing 600 divided by 120, and that gives you about 5. Now, we know that that's kind of an overestimation. The reason why we know it's an overestimation is because we've rounded 580 up, and by quite a bit, it's by £20. So we know that, yes, 600 divided by 120 gives you 5, but that is going to be an overestimate. So that means that the number that we get from that, which is 5 in this case, is going to be larger than reality. Okay, and because we know that we've got £5, if we go to kind of the number that's below that, we get B, which is 4.76. So well done for everyone who got that. I think majority of people did. Perfect. So we have discussed a bit about when we estimate. Estimating is, in my opinion, the most important aspect of quantitative reasoning. So just anyone who was a bit unsure about what we're talking about in terms of estimating, it's rounding figures, making them easier to use. Why do we round those figures? So that we can use mental maths, we can work them out quickly in our head rather than using the calculator. However, sometimes we do need to use the calculator. So what is again, a big advice for quantitative reasoning is, if you have time, try practicing as much as you can with that calculator, the online calculator that you have in the UCAT. If you feel like you're getting very, very fast with that online calculator, then maybe you can use it a tiny bit more. If you feel like it is very, very difficult to use, it's quite time consuming, then maybe just say in your mind that actually, unless I really, really need to, I won't use that calculator at all. Okay, so it's just about practicing what feels comfortable for you. I know someone's going to ask me, oh, Shivam, what would you use? The method that I would definitely say is try to avoid using the calculator. Try using your mental maths, try rounding figures. And if it's like a last resort, then try and use the calculator if necessary. So again, here, should we estimate or work precisely? I think that's quite obvious, isn't it? The gap between the prices are quite large. I think estimating will be quite appropriate, for sure. So calculator keyboard shortcuts in the UCAT, yeah, again, that's something that we're not going to be covering today. I will mention something about that in a second, but if you just bear with me with regards to that question. So, yeah, it's spaced out. I think another big trigger is what Chloe mentioned earlier, which was what is the approximate price? Again, that's another big trigger to you to say, oh, we're going to be using a bit of estimating rather than being exact. And then finally, if a question is long, it's difficult, it seems like there's a lot of reading involved, again, just skip and go straight to the estimating part, because you're just wasting your time reading lots of information. Exact value, again, this is a perfect example of when you would absolutely need to use the calculator, because you're not going to get the exact well, you need to get the exact answer in this case. So use the calculator in this. So hopefully this clarifies the difference between estimating and using that calculator and working very, very precisely. Okay, some people really struggle with that, and they're really unsure about when to estimate, when to work precisely. I hope this really clarifies that very, very clearly. Okay, you've got two very different types of questions. One is saying exact value and has numbers that are very close to each other. Perfect. So what about eyeballing graphs? So like I mentioned earlier, graphs, they come up all the time in the UCAT. Generally, they come up in, generally they ask you to do 2 or 3 steps with regards to the graph. So we'll start off with a slightly easier question, and then we'll go on to the next one. So again, I'll get the poll up as per usual. Let me just do that right now.
Take your bag off, take your
Right, there we go. There we go. So again, just give you another 5 or 10 seconds here. Perfect. Right, there we go. I'll end that poll. So can anyone tell me, just very, very quickly, put your hand up, just let me know, what did you get and how did you get there, very quickly? Otherwise, I just have to pick people. So yeah, Ava, do you mind just telling me?
So I just drew, I kind of like looked at the top of Russia and then just line, and then did the same for Japan.
Perfect. Perfect. So the reason why I put this question in is because too many people have got this question wrong when in the past. I just want to clarify, it is as simple as it says here. Okay, you eyeball the graph, you look at Russia and it says 400, you look at Japan and it's roughly around 200 or so. Okay, if you struggle with things like this, use your hand, use your finger, use something to actually, actually go across and estimate there. Okay, so the answer here is 200. So it's very simple, 400 minus 200. So let's have a go at this question. And I'll just get the poll up just now. There we go. So again, take your time, think, what do you think is the most efficient way to answer this question? So give you another 30 seconds or so. So to give you an idea, that's been about 1:15. So I'll just give a bit of extra time. Just have a think. Well, in terms of reading the question, really understand what it's asking you to do, and then think, okay, what if I had, let's say, 5 minutes to answer this question, how would I answer it? If I have 1 minute to answer the question, how would I answer it? That's a nice way to think about it. So if I am struggling to actually understand what's going on, I always ask myself, okay, let's say I had all the time in the world to answer this question, what would I do to get to the answer? So I'll just end the poll there. So Ava, do you mind just telling me a bit about how you would go about approaching this question?
Yeah, so I would find the average of automotive just by kind of like looking, like visually trying to draw a line between all of them, like to try and find the average.
And what do you think the average is roughly?
I would say about 1,000.
Yeah, I think that seems appropriate. You know, if we draw a line around here, there's some that are below 1,000, there's some a bit above 1,000. So yeah, I think about 1,000 is probably appropriate for sure. And then what else would you do then for your next step?
So I'd do the same for all other, and I got about 200.
Okay, so then what do you do next?
And then I would find out the difference, but that represents 1, so I times the difference by 8.
Absolutely. And what does that give you?
That got me about 6,400, but then obviously that was a rough estimate, so I chose B because that was the closest to it.
Yeah, nice. So nice way of thinking. So Ava, where do you think in this question the trap is in terms of one of the answers?
I'd say definitely A because I presume, yeah, you'd probably just come to the conclusion that it's the difference between one of the averages.
And do you think that's something that's quite common in the UCAT?
Yeah, I'd say so, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So actually what they're trying to do in the UCAT is they're actually trying to, they realize that you're going to trip up on some steps, and actually they give you the answer to some of those kind of mistakes that you might make. So a lot of people might have chosen 850 in here if they had used Ava's method initially, but then forgot to times by all the countries. So I think Ava's method is a really nice way of working this out. If you had all the time in the world, how would you work this out? Well, you know, obviously I'd do 1,400 plus about 1,150. That's of it. Best way to think about it. Anyone that was struggling with that is the concept of this question. But a way to answer it a bit faster is to get that average, get the average of the automotives, get the average of the robots, and then take them away from each other and make sure that you multiply by all the countries there. That's the key parts of this question. Okay, so again, anyone that didn't quite get that, I'll just repeat it one more time. So you just would, first of all, look at the question, read the question properly, and realize that this seems more like an estimating question because of that large difference between the answers. Then you would get an average. So Ava did a brilliant job of kind of roughly working out that that's around 1,000. Some might argue it's a bit higher. Ava, just remind me, what answer did you get roughly with your rough estimate?
I got 6,400.
Yeah, and why do you think? Do you think that would have been a rough underestimate or overestimate just by looking at this line here?
I would say underestimate.
And why do you think that?
Just because I would say there's more. I mean, more.
Yeah, what do you notice about kind of the amount above and below that 1,000 line that we've drawn?
Yeah, there's more data points above the line than below.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. So that's why, you know, if we're choosing 1,000, then, you know, in the back of our mind, we have to think, okay, maybe this is potentially a bit of an underestimate that I'm doing here. And kind of the same applies for that 150 that we're making down there as well. Okay, so I think it's eyeballing is very important in the graphs. There's no point adding everything up. You need to eyeball. So it's really, really good to just start practicing that. So every time you do these quantitative reasoning questions, start using the eyeballing technique, start using the estimating technique. At some point in this question, you might need to use a calculator. For example, when you were dividing that number by this number here, for example, if you were struggling, sorry, if you were taking it away and it was a number that you couldn't take away in your head, that's fine. But you're trying to use the calculator as little as possible. So if I just clarify about the over and underestimating, so it is kind of what we were talking about just now. So can anyone just kind of write in the chat, what do you think you would use as an estimate? So for this question. So we've got 9.8 inches by 11.1 by 19.7. So very easy. What roughly kind of would you use as your estimate? So just write it in the chat. So it can be a number times another number times another number. Yeah, I think 10, 10, 20 seems, I think that's quite appropriate. If it's easier, if you can do 10 times 20, which is going to be 200, then I think you can definitely do 200 times 11. So it's, again, this is why the mental maths is really useful, because it's being comfortable with using, not always using 5s, 10s, 20s, for example, or hundreds. You're able to kind of times numbers by 11 or 12 or 13. So that's what I mean by how, someone I think in the chat asked, how can you improve your mental math? So Nyasha, the thing that I would say there is try to practice your kind of 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 times tables. Okay, that's a good way to just kind of practice them, go through all those times tables, because trust me, it will absolutely pay dividends in the quantitative reasoning section. So I think it seems quite appropriate that we would do something like 10 times 11 times 20, which gives us 2,200. But, oh no, these two answers here are really close to 2,200. Which one do we choose? So can anyone, again, you can put your hand up, you can write it in the chat. Which answer would we choose based on our overestimating, underestimating technique? Yeah, Annabelle, do you want to tell me which answer you choose?
I choose the B, because we rounded up the 9.8 to a higher number, as well as the 19.7, whereas with the 11.1 we only rounded it down by 0.1. So
how much of a difference do you think that will make, Annabelle? So I understand that we've kind of rounded up slightly, but kind of, if we think about how much we've rounded it by, we've rounded it up by the kind of 0.2, 0.1 and 0.3. If we times those kind of numbers together, do you think we're starting to get a value that is roughly, well, 200 cubic inches away, or something that is going to be a bit smaller, like 50 cubic inches?
Oh yeah, maybe it might be a bit smaller actually.
Yeah, so do you see, it's a nice question, this, because it's making you think about, yes, we understand that we've overestimated, but actually we haven't really overestimated by a huge amount. And that was the idea of this question. Does that make sense, Annabelle?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. Siddharth, did you have a question? Sorry. No. Perfect. So, yeah, just to clarify, so that answer would be 2,143. Again, you can check on your calculator. But it's, again, if you can do that in your head nice and easily, again, some people might have chosen to do 10 times 10 times 20. But the reason why that might be a bit tricky is then you're starting to kind of get too close to B and C, and then you might as well just use the calculator. Okay, so I hope that makes sense. It's really important to realize if you are overestimating or you are underestimating, try to think about how close or how much are we overestimating by, because here I can see that we are overestimating, but it's so fractional, it's so small that actually the number is going to be very, very close to 2,200 for sure. That's why we chose 2,143. Okay, so a time where overestimating and underestimating can get a bit confusing is when you divide by certain numbers. So for example, if you did 80 divided by 8.4, you might make that easy for yourself and do 80 divided by 8, for example. Well, actually, you're dividing by a smaller number. Okay, so just make sure that you're knowing the difference between when you're multiplying and when you're dividing. Okay. If you're struggling with questions like this, then I would say try your best to just pick some random numbers. Get one of your family members to pick some random numbers like 8.5 times 8.6 times something, and then you can try and work out an estimate and see, okay, how close are you to the actual answer. Okay, so that's again another way to kind of practice this as well. Again, you don't need someone else there. You can just come up with random numbers too yourself. Okay, so again, we'll go through another example. So this one, I want everyone to take a bit of time, slow it down, and try and get the answer to this. Again, it might take a bit more time because it seems like a lengthier question. So have a go. And for anyone stuck at the beginning, remember there's only 5 possible answers, so we can absolutely get rid of 3 to begin with. That's your first tip. So again, anyone still struggling, I'll give my second tip. So the second tip is, again, well, the hardest part of this question is understanding what you actually need to do. So we need to find the smallest kind of gap between Russian and English words, and then we need to work out the smallest percentage of completion as well. Okay, so we want this value to be as small as possible, and we want the difference between these two numbers to be as small as possible. Okay, so for anyone struggling with this question. So, Ian, just to clarify, you get given a whiteboard. It's just a whiteboard, so you don't get pen and paper. Okay, so I'll end the poll there. Trickier question we have there. Some people might choose to skip this question, but you know, the whole idea of today is to actually think, how can we answer these questions using our estimating, guesstimating, whatever anyone likes to call it today. So let's see how we would get to the answer. So I clarified this earlier, didn't I? That if we read the question, we realize that we need to have the smallest difference between the number of words in English and Russian here. The next bit is we need to find the smallest percentage completion. Okay, so there we have it, 2 of the kind of smallest numbers. So first things first, do what I said earlier and get rid of the ones that aren't in A, B, C, D, or E. It's very obvious, but hundreds of students do this all the time. They calculate everything they see in the table without realizing that actually there are only 5 options. So again, if you are struggling with that, just write it down on a piece of paper today. Just make sure that you aren't making a basic mistake like that, because even if you're very, very good at quantitative reasoning or very, very good at certain sections, this, a basic error like that, everyone can do, everyone can do. So just make sure that you're clarifying that and just kind of getting rid of that answer in your mind straight away. So we have 5 books that we need to consider here. And the first thing that I've done is actually I've taken the difference between the words and just written it as a one number, and that's obviously going to be in thousands. So here, A Hero of Time is going to be 7, Fathers and Sons is going to be 4, Life of Avacum is going to be 8, and then Master of Margarita and War and Peace 10 and 28 respectively. We can obviously see that 10 and 28 are very large numbers compared with the others. So I think it seems appropriate that we can get rid of these 2 immediately. So get rid of Master and Margarita and War and Peace. So far, if we just take a step back, we've eliminated 2 answers and we haven't really done much work. All we've done is a bit of estimating. We've rounded these numbers. All I've done here is I've basically done 75 minus 68, and that's given me 7. Here I've done 70, take away 66, it gives me 4, etc., etc. Okay, so we've already gone from 5 to 3. That's a good start. What can we do next? Well, now we need to think about the percentage of completion, okay, which is going to be a tiny bit more difficult. So one thing we can do is we can definitely get rid of this one, Life of Avacum, because it's quite a high number here of 8, and also the percentage read is also quite high. Well, it's higher than these 2 here. So we can get rid of Life of Avacum. So we're basically now choosing between Fathers and Sons and A Hero of Our Time. How are we going to get there? Well, I think the best thing to do is then probably use the calculator. And that's exactly what I've done here. I've done 7,000 times by 0.12, which is basically 12%. And here I've done 4,000 times by 0.22. Okay, I hope that all makes sense. So it's just using percentages. So this percentage is 22%, this is 12%. The way to get a percentage is to times it by 0. And then that percent. So for example, if you want to get 12% of a number, you times it by 0.12. And then we get the answers of Hero of Our Time is 840 and Fathers, which is 880. So the answer here is A Hero of Our Time. So this should give you a really nice idea of when you need to use a bit of estimating, guesstimating initially to rule out answers, and then using your calculator for your final step. So our final step here was just distinguishing between either B or D. Okay, so quite an intimidating question here. Some people, like they mentioned in the chat, they might find this too time consuming and skip to the next question. Fair enough. But remember, quantitative reasoning isn't as easy as it used to be, in the sense that nowadays in quantitative reasoning, it's not just a one-step way to get to the answer. Normally you have to get there in 2 or 3 steps minimum. Okay. If someone might ask me now, which question, Shivam, would you skip in quantitative reasoning? Well, the ones that I would skip are the ones that are taking about 10 or more steps to get to the answer. Then that seems a bit too time consuming. But if it's 3, 5, 6 steps, no, I'd consider definitely answering it there and then and not skipping. So, Arama, just to reiterate, if I wanted to have, let's say I wanted to work out what 12% of 100 is, I would times 100 by 0.12. Okay, so just to clarify that. So 12% of something is multiplied by 0.12. I'll just write that in the chat just to clarify that for everyone as well. Perfect. So again, another timing tip here is some people, when you are practicing these questions, you might be you might be using kind of 7,000, using, you know, unnecessary amount of words when you're writing on that whiteboard. So just keep it simple, use as little numbers as possible. So here we used kind of, we know that everything seems to be in a thousands of words. So actually we're going to get rid of the thousands and just turn it into 7s and 8s and 4s and 6s, for example. Perfect. So let's just clarify how you check your answer. So on a question like this, so when you're looking back, you might be worried about the low percentage here of 15% completion for War and Peace. So one of the things that you can do is just do a very quick sense check. So I like using a sense check all the time, just to absolutely be sure that that is going to be incorrect. So a sense check here would be, well, we need to work out what 15% of 28 is. Well, we can do 15% of 30, okay? How would I work out 15% of 30 in your head? I know that I've written it here, but just have a think about that. How would you work out 15% of 30? Well, we know what 10% of 30 is, and we know what half of 10% is then. Okay, and then we add those two together. So again, keep it simple, do it step by step in that respect. So yeah, absolutely right, Uzo. So 15, yeah, so in terms of that, so 15% completion rate, if I was to work out 15% of 30,000 in my head, I know that 10% of 30,000 is 3,000, and I know that 5% is therefore 1,500. So actually 15% of 30,000 is 4,500. Okay, so just if you're struggling with questions like this, try and practice them. Try and these difficult questions, try and have a go at them. Yes, they're going to be 4, 5, 6 steps, but actually you can start to realize that it's not as hard as it initially seemed. Especially a question like this is very, very intimidating when I first saw it, but you just have to break it down step by step. And remember the importance, I've talked about it week in, week out, of eliminating. I think, I can't remember who said it in the chat, that they might skip this question, which is fair enough. It is so, you might skip this question. However, one thing that I would definitely do is if I used a bit of guesstimating and estimating for about 15 seconds, I could eliminate 2 or 3 of the answers straight away and go from a 20% chance to a 50% chance of getting it right. So that shows you the importance of elimination. Elimination is a very, very important aspect here. Okay. Another thing I wanted to clarify to everyone is that the UCAT are very clever. So they know that at every step that you get something wrong, it will be one of the answers. So for example, if it's a 3-step process, if you got to step 1 and got the answer, that will probably be answer A in the question. If you got to step 2 but didn't get to step 3, it might be B, C. I hope that makes sense. So the UCAT are very, very clever in that respect. So make sure that you're you don't get too carried away in terms of seeing kind of triggers or answers there in front of you, because I used to do this all the time. I used to get quite trigger happy and see, oh, I've got 500 and I can see that the answer is 500. But actually, no, there's a few more steps to get to the answer. Okay, so this is a really nice way of visualizing that. And this is something that really, really helped me when I was preparing for quantitative reasoning. Okay, so in terms of kind of big take-home points, I think these 6 are a really nice way of actually summarizing quantitative reasoning in general. So the first part is estimating, which is kind of what we've covered today. The next part goes hand in hand with estimating, which is working precisely and making sure that you can use that calculator quickly and as quickly as possible. The next bit is eliminating, which I just mentioned, the importance of eliminating. Eliminating is really useful because you go from 20% chance of getting it right if you guessed to something like 50%. Okay, so it's increasing those percentages. And actually, I like to call it marginal gains. It's the marginal gains that you get on certain questions where you eliminate that actually start to add up in the grand scheme of things and make the difference between getting, let's say, 680 to actually getting into the 700s and getting something like 710 on a section. So the marginal gains is something really important to think about. And I even use it today. You know, in the medical school exams that you take, you need to think about every single percent, you know, even the 1 or 2% that you can gain here and there makes a big difference at the end of it. It's the difference between passing and failing, really. Another aspect we covered today was eyeballing graphs, which I think is quite self-explanatory, but again, very, very important, and people do make mistakes on it all the time. The next part is understanding and appreciating over and underestimating. You can practice this, try and practice this over the next few days. Come up with some random numbers, maybe estimate the answer and see, okay, was that an underestimate or an overestimate? Okay, that's a really nice way of practicing that. And then finally, again, if you're unsure of an answer, go back and check using some estimation. You can roughly get there. I kind of talked a bit about how you get percentages. So for example, 12% of a number is multiplied by 0.12 to get to the answer. Okay, so does anyone have any questions about that at all? Any particularly burning questions? I know that kind of there was a lot that we covered today. Ashir, would you be able to just kind of share a link in the group chat for everyone? I just Ashir, are you still there? Sorry.
Hey, Shivam, yep. Just give me a second, please.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, so any questions, just drop them in the chat now. Like I mentioned earlier, this is the last kind of session of the series that I'm doing myself. Because actually I go on study leave next week for my exams. So I won't be able to kind of do any more of these sessions, but one of my colleagues will be. So yeah, any burning questions that you have, please ask now.
Hey, Shivam, did we tell the students about the UCAT Live Day?
Yeah, of course. If I just share my screen, I can talk about that. This is something that I completely forgot to mention. I'll just share my screen now so everyone can see this. There we go, perfect. So we have, if you book for the UCAT Live Day that we have on the 5th or the 12th of June, one of the benefits of that is that you actually get some kind of free tutoring included in that. So actually it'll be 30 minutes of free kind of one-to-one tutoring from one of our tutors. So definitely, I'll keep this up on the screen for a second. If you just take a picture or just scan that QR code. But we have the UCAT Live Day, which will be covering all the different sections, similar to what I've been covering, but actually we'll be going into slightly more detail. There might be some topics that overlap, but the whole idea of that is it's going into a bit more depth, going into a few more topics that we might not have covered in these sessions as well. Okay. So I'll just leave that there. Again, all the recordings as well, all the recordings will be on YouTube as well, if anyone's struggling with that. Perfect. And the last thing I'm going to do is I'm just, Ashir, who kind of runs in the background, he's kind of sorting out lots of things, preparing these sessions with me during the week as well. We put in a lot of time to kind of make these sessions happen and actually get them on board. So one of the things I really, really appreciate, just to kind of as a way to say thank you if need be, is if you could just kind of fill in the Trustpilot form that I've just put in on the group chat. I'd really, really appreciate that. I think Ashir's put it on there as well. It just, it makes all this time kind of worth it in terms of Ashir putting in the time and myself. So I'd really, really appreciate it. If you found the last few weeks useful and you've picked up kind of those kind of key tips and tricks that I'm trying to drill into everyone, then please leave a review. I'd really, really appreciate that. So in terms of a question bank, so we've got lots of question banks on our websites. If you go to the UCAT, if you go to the MedicMind website, we have lots of kind of question banks there, and also the UCAT official practice website as well have some. And again, Ashir will just pop that on the group chat as well. Perfect. So I think as a summary, I'm hopefully going to leave you with some really important take-home points over the last few weeks. We have covered lots and lots and lots. Chloe, I don't know if you're still there because you answered one of the questions earlier. Do you mind kind of summarizing over last week and the week before? Do you mind just kind of telling us a bit about a few of those kind of tips and tricks that you've really picked up on?
I definitely think the golden clue methods worked really well for me when I've been practicing last week.
Yeah, so do you mind just kind of summarizing what is that golden clue?
Is that what you mean, like a stated fact? If you know that that's true because that's what they've told you, and you can start filling in tables and working out the answer from the golden clue and stated fact.
Yeah, absolutely. So in decision making in particular, you need to find out, for example, words that they use constantly in the question, in the statement, and actually the more they repeat those words, that's a bit of an indicator to you. Again, the golden clue in that respect is make sure you pick up on those words which are the most, the least, the highest, the tallest. Trust me, we've gone through thousands of practice questions, and that seems to be a reoccurring theme every single time. So if you can pick those words really, really quickly, that'll be really useful. And again, we went through some things in kind of verbal reasoning a bit earlier on as well. So again, go through those YouTube videos if you need a quick refresher. And also we have kind of loads of question banks on our website as well. So yeah, I think we'll call it a day now. I really, really hope that the last few weeks have been useful. And thank you so much for everyone who's kind of been joining, participating. I'm going to kind of have to say bye and actually do some exams. That will get me into 5th year. So yeah, I really, really thank you so much for everyone joining, the participation. If you've got any questions as well, then you can always just drop us a message or just email us as well. Okay, so yeah, please, if you can, just literally takes 5 seconds. If you can fill out that Trustpilot form, I'd really appreciate that. And that I think would be a nice culmination of the last few weeks. So yeah, I'll hang around for the next few seconds for about a minute or so if there's any burning questions. But again, thank you so much. Have a really, really good rest of the evening. And I'm sure I'll see all of you soon for sure.